Thank God, some brave soul finally came along to show everyone that good graphics don't make a good game. Not even sure where to start this review, so I suppose I'll talk about why 90% of the people are here. Now, I want to preface this with the fact that I don't have the highest end graphics card, and fuck it, neither do most of you. But regardless, good graphics are still good graphics. And all of the graphics in this game look great. The lighting, the shadows, textures, so on and so forth, all look amazing. But the issue comes in with the variation when moving from room to room. I understand procedural generation, but it works like shit in a horror game. Imagine you're walking into a large haunted house. The vibes are a bit ominous, the lighting is all spooky, some douche being paid minimum wage grabs your shoulder, it's great stuff. Now imagine for the next 3 hours you walk through the same 3 rooms just in a random order. Eventually you're going to get bored as fuck, and that's what ruins this game. Also, the graphics on the menu and the characters are just fucking lazy. The font looks like papyrus with some shitty translucent fucking background, and for the characters you get the choice between a vanilla and chocolate cowboy and a couple of Amelia Earharts. But graphics aren't enough to make gameplay dull. Let's move on to There's not much to say here since there isn't much actual gameplay. You start almost every level outside of the dungeon, grab your torch and wander through the same 8 rooms trying to find the exit. There's about 5 puzzles that spawn randomly over the course of 17 levels. I won't spoil them for you, but after you figure them out once, you can breeze through them every time. And a few of them are broken, so you don't have to do them correctly to proceed, or at least I'm assuming I didn't do them correctly, I can't really be sure. There is a few items you get throughout the game, but of the 4 that you pick up, only one of them is ever really necessary. A torch, some chalk, a mirror, and a sparkly mirror are the only items you'll get throughout the game. We'll start with the mirror, which is used to check when the monster is behind you, but you'll never actually have to use it because the monster never shuts the fuck up. He's always giggling or whispering or some shit and will appear as some kind of weird mist, and most of the time he appears in front of you, so it makes the mirror kind of worthless. Later in the game, you upgrade the mirror to a sparkly talking mirror that shoots little light beams, showing off the graphics again or whatever, but it's still just as worthless. There are a few platforms that disappear when you walk on them, and with the light beam you can destroy them by shooting them, but the platforms break so fucking slow you can run across them before they'll actually be destroyed. And once again, since all the rooms are the same, you're going to figure out which platforms break and which ones don't, and you can kind of just avoid them 90% of the time. The fuck beam will also make the monster disappear when you shoot him, but he's kind of shit at his job, so aside from a few instances, you can just walk past him. The chalk is used in a few puzzles, but without spoiling them for you, it's mostly just used to doodle on the walls. You can use it to mark where you've been in case you get lost and need to backtrack, but most of the dungeons are so fucking short that you probably won't ever need to use it that way. You can also use it to draw a penis. The torch is used to see, that part's fucking obvious, but there are also a few parts where you'll have to put the torch into holders to get doors to open. You can also throw the torch at the monster, which sometimes makes him disappear, and other times he just walks around a bit and then stands there staring at you. Be careful when throwing the fucker though. If it lands behind anything or on a ledge that's too high, it bugs out and you'll be forced to wander around in the dark until you stumble into another one, which is a pretty shit mechanic. Speaking of mechanics, aside from the graphics, everything in this game is just fucking odd. The way the character runs, the way they hold their items, the way they interact with things just doesn't really make any sense. They neither put their arms up like you normally would when holding a torch or down at their sides like you would if you were running with chalk or a mirror in your hand, but instead you get this weird out front, half elbow bent, side to side wiggle jog that just keeps throwing me off every time I see it. The way you get up and down ladders is slower than fuck. You climb them just fine for not using your hands, but when you get to the top, you all of a sudden go into a super slow walk cycle to get out. Which makes sense, I suppose, if you're trying to climb a ladder with no hands. When using the chalk, you can't reach out and draw on the wall because your arms are bolted down to your fucking sides, so you have to do this awkward fucking camera angle to draw, and 90% of the time you can't see what you're doing. There aren't a lot of items to interact with. The main one you're ever going to use is one of the standing mirrors, and to rotate them, it's a pain in the fucking ass. You walk into them to rotate them one way, have to back out, and then walk into them again to rotate them the other way. Which wouldn't be terrible except for the fact the monster keeps fucking with you while you're trying to arrange these mirrors. I can't actually remember the name of the antagonist, but he looks a lot like Archer from Small Soldiers. Everyone remembers that movie, right? Yeah? Anyways, this is by far the worst part of the game and kinda kills any horror vibe the game might have had. Throughout the game, you are being stalked by this creature who is trying to either kick you out of his dungeon or maybe steal your soul, I can't really tell. And I use the word stalk loosely because he mostly just sits in the corner whispering at you. Once in a while though, he will appear as a red mist and other times he will be fully embodied to do a half-assed lunge at you. Sadly, when he lunges at you, if you're moving in almost any direction at almost any speed, he will most likely miss. Now, you might think when the beast misses you, he will turn around for another attack, but he gets so embarrassed by his failure that he'll just stand there for a minute before vanishing back to his room where he'll sulk like a little bitch. Although mechanically he's kind of boring as shit, he does have, for a horror game anyways, a somewhat interesting backstory. As simple and short as the story is, I actually enjoyed it from a horror game point of view because it comes across without being obnoxious. The story itself is pretty basic. There's treasure in a dungeon being guarded by a monster and we gotta get that shit out. The characters' backstories can be summed up as, I ain't got shit going on in my life, so I might as well dive in there. Nothing new or exciting, but what makes it different is the delivery. The intro, cutscenes, and in-game dialogue are all short and to the point, unlike most of these indie horror games that make you listen to either hours of dialogue or force you to find 3,000 fucking documents strewn across the map to get any semblance of a story. It won't win any kind of award, but for what it is, it's alright. There weren't too many bugs in the game, but there were 4 common ones I ran into a few times over a few hours playing. Most of them involve some way to clip outside the map. For example, saving and reloading the game would sometimes move you down a little bit and push you through the floor. During the generation of the dungeon, some of the exterior walls wouldn't spawn, and sometimes after dying you would spawn in an empty room with no way to escape. The only other bug I encountered was upon finishing a level, the game would restart you at the beginning of the same level instead of progressing you, but all in all the game ran pretty smoothly. This game reminds me a lot of the era in which 3D started to become popular. With the PlayStation and the N64, you would see a lot of shit games that would only focus on the graphics, kind of like this game by saying RTX or ray tracing in almost every paragraph on the Steam store page. Now, all in all, I wouldn't call the game horrible because I would be hard pressed to even call this a game, let alone a finished game, and instead call it an interactive RTX demo, and for $20 you're better off just watching a YouTube video. The gameplay is repetitive, the puzzles are boring, and the monster is more of a slight annoyance than a threat. It's a lazy attempt to make some money by putting in minimal effort in gameplay and instead just saying RTX and graphics over and over again. In my opinion, it's shit like this that really gives a lot of indie games a bad name. But if you agree with me, like, rate, comment, all that bullshit, you're fucking adults, you know what to do. Also, this guy worked on Battlefield 2 and Borderlands, so what the fuck.